Hello again. In this video, I'm going to introduce our first logical language. Through the course, we'll have 3 logical languages. The second and third logical languages are expansions of the first. So in Chapter 2, we'll expand the language a little bit more, and in Chapter 3, we'll expand the language a little bit more. So in Chapter 1, we're going to have a language that focuses on negation and the conditional, the if-then. And this video will be mostly concerned with the grammar of the language and a little bit with the meaning, with meaning as well. So I'm going to talk about, there are several different symbols in our language. So I'll say here are some symbols, I'll say here's the grammar of those symbols, and here's the meanings, and then I'll say here's some more symbols, here's their grammar, here's their meaning. So, symbols. We start with capital letters from P through Z, and we call these sentence letters. We also call them atomic, meaning that they don't have any parts. They don't have any grammatical parts. So, what does sentence letters mean? So the meaning of a sentence letter is a proposition or a claim. It's something that can be true or false. So for example, P can mean it is raining, or it can mean Bob is tall, or every dog is happy. P cannot mean raining, or Bob, or was, or dog, because none of those are sentences. They don't express propositions or claims. They're not the kind of thing that are true or false. They're components of sentences. They're components of symbols that are true or false, but the sentence letters symbolize only those elements of the language that are themselves true or false, that express propositions or claims about the world. The logical language is not going to assign meanings to particular sentence letters in general. So if you ask what claim does P mean, the answer is none. It doesn't mean any specific claim. It just is the kind of thing that can have a proposition or claim assigned to it, but by itself, it doesn't mean any of them. And we'll see why that's fine. Basically, the point is, if you think back to the first lecture talking about the topics, we said we have this argument: every Spot is a dog, every dog is a mammal, therefore Spot is a mammal. And we saw that the validity of that argument didn't depend upon the meanings of Spot and dog and mammal, upon what they meant in particular. And so we don't care about the specific meanings of the vocabulary, of the non-logical vocabulary, when we're looking at the language's logical properties. And so we don't need to assign a specific meaning to P to know about the logical properties of the sentence P. The specific meaning doesn't matter. So there we go. I'll talk more about meaning actually not in the next unit, in the next chapter. Well, it'll be discussed as we move forward. We'll talk more about truth and falsity when we get to things called truth tables in chapter 2, where we do a sort of a formal analysis. But for now, talk about meaning is going to be relatively loose. We'll talk about translating symbols from, sentences of English into sentences of the logical language, and that will help us to understand the meanings of these symbols more. So in that way, we'll be talking about meaning in the next week. So we have grammatical rules for our language. And the first grammatical rule, and these are grammatical rules for being a sentence. We're going to have a bunch of rules that say symbol sequences like these, those are sentences, and if you're a symbol sequence and you don't follow those rules, you're not a sentence. So our first rule is a very simple rule. They're actually all going to be pretty simple. But the first rule says every sentence letter is a sentence. So we have this capital letter P, and it's a sentence letter, and now we've been told, oh, by the way, it's a sentence, which is kind of the point of the name, calling it sentence letter. Okay. Next symbol is this thing, and what is that? That's called a tilde, and it's also called the negation sign. It doesn't go, tildes go on top of letters. This tilde is not going to go on top of letters. So remember, we have our grammatical rules. The first rule is that every sentence letter is a sentence, and the second letter says if you have a sentence, circle whatever that sentence is, then if you put a tilde on the front of it, you get a new sentence. So you have a sentence, you can always stick a tilde on the front, you get a new one. What does this mean? So it's the negation sign, and so that's what its meaning is going to have to do with. So specifically, we can think of this symbol as symbolizing it is not the case that. So if the sentence letter P symbolizes Bob is tall, then tilde P symbolizes it is not the case that Bob is tall, and tilde P also symbolizes Bob isn't tall. Those two sentences in English, while they're grammatically different, are synonymous, and that's because of their logical structure. And so not P could be used to symbolize either of those two different English sentences. So note that the negation sign attaches only to sentences, it doesn't attach to other things. For now, that's not a big deal, we only have sentences, but as we'll see later, there are places where we might want to stick it on other pieces of vocabulary, and in our language, you can't. Okay, so we've got our sentence letters, which are capital letters P through Z, and we have the tilde, our negation sign. We also have an arrow, and the arrow is going to be the conditional. And going with the arrow are parentheses, and we have parentheses because they provide our punctuation. So we have a new grammatical rule for this. It says if you have two sentences, then if you put a parenthesis, and then one of the sentences, and then an arrow, and then the other sentence, and then another parenthesis in the right one, you start with the left one, you end with the right parenthesis, then you get a new sentence. So if circle and box are sentences, then left parenthesis, circle, arrow, box, right parenthesis is also a sentence. And nothing else is a sentence. This is important. The first three rules tell us here are some things that are sentences, and the fourth rule says if you're not a sentence according to the first three rules, you're not a sentence at all. Okay, so what does the arrow mean? Well, it's the conditional sign. Conditional, if then. So the arrow symbolizes if blah blah blah, then blah blah blah. So if P symbolizes Bob is tall, and Q symbolizes Bob is happy, okay, then P arrow Q symbolizes if Bob is tall, then Bob is unhappy, and Q arrow P symbolizes if Bob is unhappy, then Bob is tall. So one last piece of terminology. In talking about conditionals, we often want to refer to their different pieces. So the part that comes before the arrow is called the antecedent. The part that comes after the arrow is called the consequent. So you want to remember those two words because I will often say antecedent or consequent. And you want to know what I'm talking about. So how do you remember them? Well, so remember the words, and then you remember that A comes before C. Right? A comes before C in the alphabet. The antecedent comes before the consequent in the left-to-right order of the conditional. So you might be wondering, well, gee, that's nice. We have a logical language. Why did we introduce it? We introduced it in order to avoid grammatical ambiguity. And so in the next video, I'm going to talk more about grammatical structure and grammatical ambiguity and the grammatical structure of sentences of our language. In this video, I've said here are the symbols, the sentence letters P through Z, the negation sign, the conditional sign, and the parentheses. And we have 3 rules for forming sentences of our language. All the sentence letters are sentences. If you have a sentence and put a negation on the front, you get a new sentence. And if you have 2 sentences, if you put the left parenthesis and then one sentence, and then the arrow, and then another sentence, and then the right parenthesis, you have another sentence. And nothing else is a sentence. So in the next lecture, or next video, I'll talk a little bit about the grammar of the language that results from this specification. Thank you for watching.